Welcome to another episode of The Wave. I'm your host, Don Texan, coming to you from my home alone, here in Port Alberni. And today we're going to this is a special edition of The Wave, by the way, because it's a special day for me, personally, because this is the day that marks the first year anniversary of my partner, Brian Moore, who passed away last year on this day. And so I am putting up this episode with a special guest who will be helping us understand the process that we have to go through when it comes to grieving and disability and all the sad experiences or traumatic experiences we have in our life. And I would like to thank him for coming on the show. Please welcome Mr. Joshua Dahling from anyway, I'll let him tell you what it's all about, the organization is all about. So thank you, Josh, for uh, being with me on the show today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and this organization and this advocacy that you're involved with?
There's lots to tell you about myself, so I won't go there. That could be a whole series.
Another
Um,
interview, another episode.
yeah, um, yeah. I guess I'm with the Camp KERRI Society. My partner, Dr. Heather Mohan, and I founded the organization. And despite our name, which has camp in it, we're not a children's summer camp. We specialize in doing advocacy, education, and supports for children, youth, adults, and families who are coping with serious illness, grief, and loss.
I see.
Yes.
So, more or less, the one that's on the table right now would be coping with grief. Can you
Mhm.
talk about a little bit about how to cope with grief? Like I'm coping with my grief, 1 year passing of my partner, and I have been meaning to like get involved somehow and go to the are the are you just of the same philosophy of the 7 stages of grief and stuff like that?
No.
Okay, that's
So,
very interesting.
yeah, maybe that's where we should begin.
Uh-huh.
What differentiates us from others? We've our organization's been around since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
However, my partner Heather started our first program in 1998, which still
Okay.
runs today. Um, and we have a few signature programs. One is our camps, our family bereavement retreats, our and our support groups. And we work from a different framework than a lot of practitioners, I guess, are familiar with, and a lot of people in public. A lot of people are familiar with stage theories. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a palliative nurse who developed um, stages of grief. She worked in palliative care, and that was intended uh, for people that are dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and what doesn't get spoken about often enough is the articles that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross published afterwards. She published many articles saying, the world's misunderstanding me here. It was never intended for bereavement. However, that's
Okay.
how it's been utilized because lots of people like things in boxes, neat little tidy things that make sense. They're easy to teach and easy to pass on. We believe
Well, that is the common I guess the common orientation. Everybody needs a box. Everybody needs a label. Everybody needs a classification or a category, or whatever. I
yeah.
was discussing with a friend of mine. Oh, only vegetables need labels. I said, oh, so does fruits. That's why the fruity people like us have labels. We have the L label, the G label, the B label.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned something that just caught my attention just now. You said grief and bereavement. Are those two different things?
Yes, they are. But I just
Okay.
want to first talk about how we differentiate ourselves from the standard approach to bereavement care.
Okay.
We believe that people grieve over time. We don't go through these different stages of, denial and anger and bargaining, all that jazz. And then you come to a place of acceptance and you're all, uh, all well, right? We believe that when someone experiences a loss, that they maintain a connection with the loved one that has died.
Mm-hmm.
And those feelings of loss, those feelings associated with grieving, when you're mourning a loved one, those don't go away. Uh,
Oh,
but
tell me about
rather,
it. Yes, they don't. They don't.
yes, here you are a year out. And if you were to check yourself according to the stage theories, I'd be curious to know which box you were in, because we believe grief is a little messy. It's
Yes.
sort of like finger painting, right? Um, so what we try and encourage people to do is to be open and curious, and to go through those motions of grief. Uh, and also, for everybody, it's different. So the intensity of mourning the loss of, like, say, your partner, as opposed to like a distant cousin that you've never met, may be different for some people. And we also, our approach to doing the supports is typically what happens if someone has a loss, particularly like in North America. If you go and you seek counseling, that person will see a counselor on their own.
Yes.
If you have children, you will go see a counselor, and your children may or may not go see separate counselors. We believe in working with families as a unit, so we'll see everybody in the family, sometimes collectively, sometimes individually, and we also believe in connecting uh, people that come to us with a community. So rather than feeling isolated and grieving alone, we build this compassionate community around people. It's a community of volunteers. It's a community of alumni, people who have gone through loss, that come together to support one another. And that's different, and it's unique, unfortunately, but something we're trying to change. Also, there's a lot of organizations in Canada that don't have the resources. Uh, there's virtually no funding, government funding for bereavement care in Canada. Organizations such as hospices have to fundraise so that they can provide a counselor to see their clients. So that is something I'm trying to change personally, and have been doing for well over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's what you mentioned, that you're advocating for this for what's this cause again you're advocating for?
So I've recently had a petition before the House of Commons, which was successful. I've done others in the past. And what I was requesting is a few things. One is for the government to extend paid bereavement leave. Right now, if you have a loss under the current legislation, which was changed, I believe, in 2017, 2018, from under the labor code, they extended the 3 days of bereavement leave to 5, meaning you can
I
have up
see.
to 5 days off, 3 days of which are paid by your employer.
I see.
So I'm trying to get that extended. I believe that from the work I do and from my own personal losses, 3 to 5 days is not enough time um, to grieve the loss of a loved one.
Oh, definitely
Um,
not.
Particularly in the first week and often the first months, the emotions are quite intense.
Oh, they are. I can speak from experience. Like, I don't know, it took me about a month or 2 months actually to I tried to go back to work, but my mind wasn't just it wasn't there. It's I don't know, it's like mush or something. I can't explain the feeling, but there's a cloud in my head, and I feel my thoughts just wandering here and there, or sometimes I would like just get stopped dead in my tracks, and I would just cry. Out of the blue. I would just cry for a moment. I have to stop and cry for a while. I feel like crying again. I get all over again right now. But anyway, so I just want to establish, for the sake of the wave, the wonderful Alberni experience, like, what is your connection to Port Alberni?
So I moved to Port Alberni in 2018.
Uh-huh.
in the end of June, actually, in 2018.
Oh, well.
My connection to Port Alberni prior to that was I would stop for gas on my way to Bamfield when I went camping,
Okay.
and I kept going.
Okay.
And
Then what made you want to settle here in Port Alberni?
I was on, well, Heather and I, like often, like December, January are very busy for us. So we take our Christmas holidays usually in February. Um, uh, the rate of suicide is usually higher during those months.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, we get a lot of
About that.
calls that period. So any rate, we have a friend who has an old cabin in Qualicum who lets us use that from time to time. And we were in Qualicum, and we were driving around, and we decided to go into a realtor office and ran into this young guy that was just really nice. And
Uh-huh.
somehow we started talking, and then he convinced us to show us around, particularly in Port Alberni. Uh,
Okay.
so we went for a drive, and we looked at, I think, 3 or 4 homes. And the house I'm in now, I kid you not, I walked in the kitchen, I looked out the window, I said, let's make an offer.
Oh, wow.
Um, and what's interesting though is we were hoping to move out of the city. We were in the Lower Mainland um, for years, but part of it was our office is there. The other part is just around affordability. The prices really skyrocketed over the years, and at any rate, it was this. I had a big X on Vancouver Island.
Oh,
So,
really?
oh yeah, we had a 4 or 5 hour radius of the Lower Mainland, of even Kelowna. Like we looked at Kelowna and Kamloops and all in between.
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver Island, a big X. And so this is the irony: is here I am
So
in
X
Vancouver
meaning you're not going there. So X.
ever.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah. So here we are, and I love it. Every single day I wake up, I'm like, I can't believe I live here.
Oh, that's how I feel too.
Well, it's a beautiful area, like with the, all the trail. We're discovering new trails every day, right? There's so
Yes.
many things to do outdoors. We did tubing last year on the river. Unbelievable. Have you done that yet?
I've been invited a couple of times, but no. But I've been up Mount Arrowsmith. I've been the Hole in the Wall. I've been the Alberni Trail. Like you said, there's so many trails to discover every day.
I'm
I
gonna
was
have to take
hoping
you
to start a
tubing
series
then.
about hiking buddies, but the COVID-19 came around, so no more hiking buddies for a while. You can hike solo, but no hiking
Well, we
buddies.
we could tube 6 feet apart.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'll take you tubing this summer.
Sure, why
Yeah.
not? Uh,
Um, but
this
what's
summer, the 22nd of June is another significant date for me because June 22nd is when I moved to Port Alberni. June
oh,
22nd, 2015. So that's the anniversary of my moving to Port Alberni to live with Brian, who passed away on May 9th or May 10th, actually. And then I did his memorial service in my garden that I dedicated to him on June 22nd, which would have been our 5th year anniversary living together.
oh.
Uh, okay, so let's go back to you mentioned something about the suicide rate being high during a certain month of the year. Why
During
do
the
you think that is?
during the holiday season, it generally is. Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
why do you think that is?
Well, I think I can only speculate, and just from conversations I've had with people that have made attempts, is our holiday season is often a time about haves and have-nots. So for
Oh,
some
yeah.
people, if they don't have the resources to buy presents, they get depressed. Some people may, particularly in our community, the first anniversaries are as you're experiencing, can be quite difficult. Um, so yeah, I just think there's people are just very sensitive to what they don't have, and it's a difficult time for a lot of people for various reasons. We have this. idea that families are supposed to get together every Christmas and holiday.
Hmm.
Well, my biological family, we stay apart on those days, and probably
Oh,
for good reason. Um, there's just it doesn't always work out, right? So yeah,
okay. So I want to get back to the way you deal with bereavement and grieving. So I come to you as a person who wants to be helped or supported in my grieving. What would you recommend, or what would you do in my case?
well, if you came to me personally,
Mm-hmm.
um, or to our organization, we have a lot of people that you can get support from, whether they're counselors. Not everybody needs or um, wants to have cognitive therapy. They don't want to sit with a counselor. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of music therapists.
Oh
I think
wow,
we actually
music.
have the most music therapists on contract out of any organization in Canada.
Yes, that's
We
where
have
I first met you, if I believe. Like you were doing some music
yes,
stuff, and and you were talking about this music. It was just so, I don't know, it was just overwhelming. It was heartwarming, overwhelming. It was so touching. That's why that was a very beautiful concert you did.
yeah, that was some of our music therapists, um, and then we have art therapists. We also have peer support groups. We do a number of things, and a lot of our programs. Well, we do them in British Columbia, Ontario, and Atlantic Canada. But because of COVID, it's actually made us more accessible in some ways to the rest of the country. We've been serving Canadians coast to coast for a number of years, but our physical locations have been restricted primarily
Of
due
course.
to fundraising, the fundraising that we have to do. But we've moved a lot of our supports and programs online and added them to we had an online network in 2012, which has been ongoing. It's a private network for people that are have lost a loved one.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so now our counseling and our support groups uh, and our workshops are all online. So
Oh, that's great. So
yeah,
where do I go to find you online?
campkerri.org.
Camp Carrie. Carrie is spelled Kerri.
KERRY.
Oh, Camp Carrie. Okay, Kerry. So Camp Carrie. That's one word, and then .org. So you live here in Port Alberni, but is your base of operation here in Port Alberni as well?
Well, we have an office in New West,
Mm-hmm.
but we operate, our teams are mobile. So we work, this is a term that a lot of hospices are using these days, called compassionate communities,
Okay.
compassionate community model. So this is a model for which we've operated from the beginning. Primarily, we were forced to do it because there's no money, there's no government resources.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, when we started with our support groups and with our family retreats or camps, uh, we couldn't afford to pay, doctors and nurses and psychologists and all of our therapists. So we would ask them to volunteer, and that is a compassionate community model. You pull on the
Mm-hmm.
resources from the community uh, to to build the community of support around um, those that come to us. So yeah, we have a mobile team, and we go into communities as far as a house it right to PEI, and we work with members from each community and foster those compassionate communities.
Okay. So do you like charge for anything, or this is a free service that you just fundraise for? And how does it work in terms of
So
funding?
so right now, about a third of our funding is from individual donations. A third is from fundraising events that we do. And some people in communities, we've had kids go and sell cookies in their schools, right?
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. A lot of people want to give back once they've received help, and some people just identify with our cause and want to do something. And then the other third is through fundraising, grants, and um, oh gosh, I just had a mind blank.
That's okay.
Um, long days. Um,
Donations, fundraising, individual contributions.
there
Do
we
you?
go. Donations,
Uh-huh.
fundraising, and grants.
So, are there any fees that are involved? If, like, for
Oh,
example,
so
I
yeah,
would.
so all of our programs for this year, we're not asking for any fees. But with some of our programs, what we started doing about 3 or 4 years ago is we request people make a contribution fee, we call it. So, for instance, our family bereavement retreat in BC has about 200 people. Families come from all over the province, and we bring about 85 volunteers, 75 to 85 volunteers. A
Mhm.
lot of people to house and feed. Our costs are about $2,000 a family, and we ask families to contribute 600, but we never refuse anybody access to our programs due to an inability to pay. We don't ask them to show us their financials. It's an honor
Mhm.
system. For our counseling, same thing. We ask people to contribute whatever they can. With our support group, same thing. But right now, everything's online, and because we had a lot of the infrastructure, we had our online network set up in 2012. We've been using this platform since its inception in 2011. So there's really not much overhead or rental for us. So
Okay. Are you doing anything in particular for the locality of Port Alberni? Like, if
yes, we
there's an.
are.
Okay, so what exactly is that?
So we've actually taken some families from Port Alberni to our family bereavement retreat.
Okay.
We've collaborating with hospice Port Alberni on a number of things, and I believe we're in talks. It might be too early to say this, but I believe we'll be doing a partnership to provide counseling for children and youth.
Okay.
I don't believe there's any bereavement services for children and youth in the valley, which is common with most communities across the country.
Yeah,
Uh,
because normally, for the children, you would expect it's the parents who would be doing the counseling and the guidance and all that stuff. But
yeah.
usually, not every child has a parent who's able to do that.
Yeah, but also there's challenges too, right? So lots of families that come to us, generally one of the parents has passed away.
Oh,
But we've
okay.
had families come to us where both parents have passed, or where a child has passed, or where multiple members have passed. Um, some Often what happens is they don't have the resources for childcare or that sort of thing. Um, But yeah, most communities don't have bereavement services in Canada, and those that do, most of them don't have services or the resources to facilitate programs for children and youth.
Well, with the ongoing crisis right now, with so many people dying,
Yeah.
has that somehow like affected your organization? I mean, have you come across people wanting you know your services?
Well, as I said in the beginning, I've been petitioning the government for well over a decade, and I've met with politicians across this country. I can't tell you how many politicians I've sat down with over the years.
Too
Um,
many.
Well, I can almost play out it's predictable, you know. Uh, our cause is something that everybody can or will relate to in their lifetime,
Definitely.
right? Um, and the fact that it's not properly supported really um, bothers me, because we see firsthand the effects of people not having supports. Not everybody has a support system. Most people don't even have 2 weeks pay or the resources set aside so that they can take time off work. And so, yeah, it really drives me to try and get some legislative changes done. Um, with the COVID, it hasn't really increased our referrals. I know most of society, we're not used to seeing a counter on our TV. Doesn't matter what channel you turn it on. There's a counter. Oh, there's a death in Vancouver. There's a death in Toronto. Oh, you can check out all the deaths around the world. Most people don't live that way. In our field, though, people that work in hospice palliative care, people that do bereavement services, that's all we do. So for us, death is normal. And what we've been trying to do, and what a lot of organizations have been trying to do, is normalize those conversations around death, dying, and grief. Um, but what I can tell you is, so for instance, I think this year the estimated death toll was around 279, close to 300,000 people. It's estimated to die in 2020. With COVID, it might be an additional 1 to 2,000. Um, Even if it went 10 or 20,000 or 30,000, it's really not going to make a significant impact to the overall number of deaths that are expected this year. Um, However, because of the restrictions we've had around having to distance ourselves, where people aren't able to be with their loved ones that are dying in hospice or palliative
Hmm.
care, where you can't attend funerals. Those things are traumatizing Canadians. People around the world are being traumatized by the death. So essentially, what's happening is virtually every death that occurs now will result in what we refer to as compounded and unresolved grief. And that is where we're going to see a lot more of the what I refer to as the symptoms of unresolved and compounded grief, which include anxiety, depression, suicide, which often leads to homelessness, addiction, and those sorts of things. And those are the issues that can, when you have compounded and unresolved grief, um, essentially trauma, uh, and you don't have that adequately supported, those symptoms of grief can become lifelong. And that is the crisis that I'm seeing as a result of COVID. And this is another reason why I've petitioned the government countless times now to make legislative changes, not only to extend bereavement leave from 3 to 5 days to something maybe like maternity or paternity leave,
Hmm.
but also to have it paid. Right now, in Canada, the Employment Insurance Act will allow you up to 15 weeks of payable leave due to illness or trauma. So this was a response that the government gave to me in my petition. They're like, well, you can take your 3 to 5 days off, three which will be paid, and then you can go to your doctor and get a note, and then apply for your 15 weeks off if you're eligible. The issue with that is then you have to go in to see your doctor, psychiatrist, or a licensed practitioner, and they have to write a note saying that you have a disorder. So you have clinical depression or some other type of associated disorder. And the issue with that is I believe that is misdiagnosis. Someone that is grieving, that is crying or going through those motions of grief, does not have a disorder. It's a natural and completely normal response to losing a loved one. And the issue with having that on your record, and I know this from having worked with a number of people over the years, is if you're a pilot, if you're someone that manages a firearm, whether in the military service or
The
the
RCMP.
police, if you are a medical practitioner, like a physician or a surgeon, um, there's a lot of jobs, despite laws we have around discrimination, it's going to be very difficult for you to maintain or acquire a job once you have that on your record. Um, Also, and even though these things are meant to be confidential, I can tell you from having done this work for a long time, they sometimes manage to surface, particularly in custody issues, custody disputes.
Oh, yes.
So, Johnny over here, lost one of his children. He's got a note that says that he's emotionally unstable. He has a mood disorder. And a grandparent is going for custody of the remaining children. I can tell you, the chances are the children will be placed in the care of the grandparent or whatever, right? So I don't believe that I don't think we should need to sacrifice our integrity or our dignity and take a misdiagnosis because they're grieving. And that is kind of what stands.
Now, you mentioned something about unresolved grief.
Yes.
Is grief ever resolved?
Well, it's a term we use. What I would, how I mentioned in the beginning is around the intensity.
Okay, yes.
Right? So I know, for instance, my dad died when I was a teenager, and at the time it was a very traumatic death, and I had to identify his remains. At that time,
Oh,
and for
wow.
many years after, because in my family we didn't talk about it, and I remember years later, when I went to school to do stuff and I'm learning how to do counseling and stuff, I had to actually work through some of my own uh, baggage or some of my own
Mm-hmm.
issues. There was this intensity to it. I couldn't even speak around the death of my father without, um, I'd lose sleep, I'd feel sick. However, that intensity is dissipated. So I would say that in relation to that term, I would say it's resolved. I've come to a place where I'm, I'm comfortable that with talking about it, whereas I wasn't before.
I see.
Um, yeah, there's a sense of closure, I guess.
I guess what you could say is like it diminishes over time, right? I mean, the intensity might be for me, it's just 1 year. It's still kind of strong, but over time it will slowly, get resolved or get diminished, and I won't feel as sad or as bad over time.
Well, I don't know. I think we're all different. I think it depends on what you do. Like just in the little I know you speak openly about your partner. Some people just shut down, right?
Oh,
So what we try to do in our community and all the people that come to us is we encourage those ongoing conversations, right? And to create rituals in your life to honor your loved ones. So rituals can be lighting a candle. Uh, uh, what we do in our house is we light 24-hour candles, which someone that came to us years ago and told us in the Jewish faith they have these 24-hour candles. And we thought that's great. So we adopted that as our ritual. Um, I know some people they go and they paint rocks every year, and so yeah, I think everybody's different, but I think it also depends what you do and what you don't do.
okay.
Um,
One last question before we end the interview. So, are you accessible to people for this kind of service, or should they go online? Do they contact you personally? Well, I can contact you personally because I know
yes.
you, but for the public who are watching, are they able to access you in person, or do they have to go through a website or make an appointment or something like that?
Yeah, so well, if people just go right now, if they go on our website, they can phone our office, they can send an email, they can email me. But to be honest, I'm not the best person to email because I get so many, and I don't always respond to them all.
Oh, I
Um,
know. It took a while to get to, but I'm
but
glad you did.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call for my message.
but yeah, and as I said, a lot of our services, so education and support programs are being offered online. I believe in the next month or two, we'll be offering some of our training. One of the things we do is my partner Heather teaches on the Faculty of Medicine at UBC and a number of universities around the country. We do education for service providers. So we're going to have some training modules online for people that want to learn how to run support groups and that sort of thing. Um, and yeah, lots of things online.
Well, thank you, Josh. I mean, there's so much more I would like to talk to you about, but we are out of time. Maybe we'll do another interview sometime in the future. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. This has been your host, Don Texan. We'll catch you next time on the wonderful Alberni Valley Experience. Catch you later on the wave.